is, what is your definition of success?
I used to have a very different definition of success. Success to me was, actually, no, I take that back. I didn't really know what success was when I first started doing music. Now it's changed quite a lot. Success to me is being able to live a free-ish lifestyle. It's not about the financial gains. It's more about how much time you can free up for yourself and your family. So for me at the minute, I think I'm relatively successful in that respect because I've managed to build myself into a place where I can do pretty much what I like, which is brilliant. I mean, the struggle to get here is a different story. But yeah, I think success is about time rather than money.
That's great. That might be one of the best. The fact you managed to get that much into such a short answer, but with so much like behind it. That's a very good answer. I totally resonate with that because like the more I chat to people on this podcast and just in life, I find that I found a few things. One is that with varying levels of like success in the more traditional terms in the music industry, there seem to be the same problems for everyone, it seems, you know. And it does seem like even some of the more, you know, quote unquote successful people I've chatted to still have the same things come up, and I think time is more the thing to
it's an interesting, it's very funny you should bring that up, because today I watched quite a big artist. I'm not going to name the artist, but they had an interview, and I saw a reel on Instagram, and they had a very similar question that he was asked, and his reply to that was, "I'm not Prince, so I've failed."
Oh, it was. I'm not going to say who. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't think you can. I don't think it's bad to say who.
No, maybe not.
Just in case.
It's something that I personally wouldn't go. I wouldn't go down that route because I have a slightly smaller ego.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm slightly more grounded. I've got no idea. Who knows? But it's definitely not something that I would say.
No, but I think. Did you watch the full? Did you just get a reel, or did you get the full clip?
I think I watched around about 30 seconds, and I kind of turned it off.
I think life stops at about 30 seconds nowadays, anyway. So
yeah. I was quite busy today, but it was really interesting because it felt very Spinal Tap to me. Yeah.
Do you want to hear some devastating news?
What?
I've not seen Spinal Tap.
But you might enjoy it. It's old now, but it is basically the metalhead's struggle in visual format. It's amazing, like the stuff that they say, and are you aware what it is?
I mean, I think I've almost seen or heard all of the bits.
It's an amazing parody of just metal artists just trying to come across as more than what they are and making the most out of very bad situations. Just everything goes wrong for them, but it's so beautiful and it's so relatable as well.
I feel like I need to tune into it because I've never I've heard the references. I've just never actually. It feels like a bit sort of.
I'll be very honest. The only reason I know about it is because the guys in TesseracT, or whenever we get together, if we're on tour, we're in the studio, we have to watch Spinal Tap because it just brings you down to earth so quickly, and it's quite funny.
The one we always reference in the studio was Ace Ventura. That always just kills me. Jim Carrey.
I love Jim Carrey. Oh, one of my heroes, man.
He seems to have gone through a bit of a weird sort of cycle of enlightenment, and I can't remember what I've seen a few interviews of him where he's just at these prestigious awards. Have you heard the thing where he gets introduced as 2-time nominee Jim Carrey?
That. It's so amazing.
I absolutely love that clip. Yeah, there's some crap clips on the internet, but that is a good one.
He's actually got some very good motivational speeches as well. Insanely good. He's a very wise man. He's definitely turned into one, and I kind of relate to that because I grew up watching Jim Carrey, and I myself I've got a very particular sense of humor. Like, you feed me slapstick, I'm going to laugh all day. But my sense of humor is just so low. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not a very intellectual person, let's say. So I find that stuff hilarious. And his whole mannerisms, the way that he acts, it's just perfect comedy to me. So for him to go through that transition of, stupidity to ultra wisdom is fascinating. And I'm 40 next year, and I definitely feel like I've gotten a lot wiser over the years. And that's probably why my outlook on life is slightly different to maybe a lot of other peers in the music industry, because like when I started, not to just turn the conversation onto me, but it's a relatable comment. But when I first started, I was just I just wanted it. I was mad for it. The drive and the energy within me to become an artist was just like, it's overwhelming. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I feel like my lifestyle was very different to a lot of other people, because I went from being a student at A level, then I went to work in a factory, then I joined the police force and did that for nearly 10 years. And then all the time I was bumming around in bands, just traveling around, networking, trying to make a name for myself. And it was such a hard struggle, but at the same time I had a lot of like real life, day-to-day commitments. Like I've got a childhood sweetheart. We've been together for over 22 years. We were together, engaged at a very young age, got a house, got the mortgage, got the car loans, the family. And all the time I've kind of grown as an artist, I've had to have, I have had, not had to have, but I have had, and I chose to have those kind of like grounded responsibilities. And I kind of, worked hard in the background to reach where I am at the minute. Whereas a lot of people kind of don't seem to have trodden the same path. They've been kind of free spirits, touring and traveling, never really been solidified or owned their own house or had those big financial commitments. So I've always kind of like been in this weird position where I'm very different to a lot of peers that I've worked with and met. It's a very weird thing.
Do you ever kind of look at like, if life had you gone down the sort of whimsical, the almost fairy tale sort of rock star kind of route of just dropping absolutely everything and just pursuing that. How do you think you'd be different if you'd done that? At the same age now. I
think the difference is that if I would have done that when I was a lot younger, I think I would have probably made even more mistakes, because I'm a bit of a late bloomer. I was quite immature growing up. And I feel like when I joined the police, I had to grow up very quickly. And that made me a very different person. But at the same time, like, I didn't really get into music until I was in my mid-20s. And I started to get into a few decent bands. And I got my first record deal at the age of 26, I think. And then I actually did make a big sacrifice, because I left my career to become a metalhead for life. So I definitely did make that plunge, but I did it a lot later on in life, I think. But I think I would have made more mistakes.
Yeah, that's an interesting... we've got something somewhat in common, because I dropped out of uni. I was doing business at uni, dropped out to go to music school. So it's a bit of a different... I was a bit younger, so I would have been 19 when I did that. But it's interesting, what was that kind of... When you looked at dropping everything, if you like, and dropping a lot of probably stability and career stability, what's kind of going through your head when you do that?
Oh, it was frightening. It was so frightening, because I had, got a fiance who's a teacher. She'd gone through university to become a teacher. Like I said, I'd been in the police force for like 8 years. I was nearly at the top of my pay scale. I could have retired at the age of 49, because when I joined at the age of 18, it was like 2000. So in the police force, they had like an old police pension scheme, which was like incredible. So I would have been made, but I didn't want to sit in a job for 30 years that I didn't like and become a cynical, boring, miserable man. So I would have never done that anyway, because like it was a weird thing, because joining the police was always a plan B. I didn't study music. I wanted to be a singer. I knew that I wanted to be a singer. So even when I was in the police, I was like doing day shifts from like 7 till 4, driving 3 hours to London or Winchester or Colchester or wherever where my connections were to do rehearsals, and then I'd drive home again, and I wouldn't get in until like 2:33 in the morning, and then I'd be back on another day shift at 7, and I did that repeatedly for years just to be involved in music. And it got to a point where I kept asking for a career break, and the police force wouldn't give it to me. And this was just at the point where I signed to Centra Media with TesseracT, and it was a case of, right, it's either all or nothing. I was so unhappy in my job as well, and it was the perfect time to kind of do it, and I definitely did feel it. I went from earning like a very good wage to be like the first year of being self-employed, I was earning a fraction, and it wasn't enough to pay the mortgage bills. It was frightening, which kind of leads towards one of the main reasons why I actually left TesseracT after the first album campaign, and then tried to do my own thing and make money and survive. And it just so happens that kind of returned later on, but it was very frightening. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can totally kind of resonate with the, like, so I just teach guitar. That's my kind of thing at the moment. I'm a bit nervous about the next month or so, or actually by the time this comes out, everyone's bills are going to be silly, ridiculous prices. I don't know if that'll even happen, because I don't know whether they'll just be mass disobedience and because like but I kind of worry, because I kind of think like guitar lessons are hardly a priority, you know. If I were like, I don't know, a doctor or something, you know, or some sort of self-employed like healthcare person, it's not like people are going to stop going to that. But guitar lessons
what you do is a luxury to a lot of people, and people are going to be cutting corners and saving pennies. So it's a concern for sure.
Yeah, I'm healthy. I could probably, there's probably a few body parts I could kind of like dish out.
Sell off.
Just buy them back at a later date.
We joke.
Yeah. No, that's, I kind of, and is that where, because you talk about time being your, and the resource, to being the resource that it is that where things like Twitch come in? Because that, for me, that's, it's something I sort of toy with the idea, and I'm on and off. I got to the, what's it, affiliate, is that the one? The first
nice.
one.
That's
cool.
I
got to there. But I just found that I would always feel quite distracted when I was on Twitch, and then also if I wasn't in the mood for doing it, but I was on there, if I'm playing guitar and I'm not in the mood for it, and I know someone's watching, it's like, so it's a kind of a two-parter. It's like, A, does that Twitch tie in with this idea of time, and also B, what happens when you're not really in the headspace for it, but you feel like you need to be out there online?
I should probably explain how I fell into it, which was quite random. It was the back end of 2019 when TesseracT had finished the campaigning for Sonder, so we'd finished all the touring, and we were due to kind of go into album writing mode again. And I had a bit of free time, so I was, for the first time ever, I thought, you know what, you can live stream on PS4 or whatever. I want to give it a go, and all I had was a little earpiece and my controller. I didn't even have a video camera, and I went live just for a laugh. And then people started to join in. This was on YouTube, and people ended up really liking it and like messaging me saying, "Could you do more of that stuff?" You know, it was really fun. And I didn't think any more of it. I didn't think anything more of it. But we had another show a few months later, and at the show, for the first time ever, we had some fans that had brought in a cardboard cutout. You know, our fans sometimes do that, normally at pop shows. Weird for a metal show. But it wasn't even anything to do with TesseracT. It was a group of people that held up a sign that said, "Dan, play more #Res2," because I was playing Resident Evil 2. And it was, I was like, what? That's so weird. So I started to do a bit more. And actually, I got approached by one of the fanbase and said, "Have you ever considered going on Twitch? I can help you with like live streaming and OBS." And they helped me with all the back end stuff. It was so kind of them. And from then on, it never stopped. Like the first few streams that I had a very basic webcam. My studio was pretty bare, and people were literally throwing their support at me and saying, you should, save up for a computer, you should save up for this bit of equipment. And everything that I have now is pretty much the result of the fan base that we have donating towards what I'm doing. So I never felt tired of it, and it was very exciting all the time. When I'd go on stream, there'd be new people, and then I'm a bit of a completionist, and I wanted to see it through and get to partner status without any support, because I didn't realise at the time, but when you're an artist, you can get hold of a music manager at Twitch, and they can help you grow your channel and help you grow to partner. And in some cases, they can just give you partner status without having to meet those thresholds of streaming for a month and having a minimum viewership of like 60 to 100 viewers. But I did that organically, so that made me even more kind of not protective, but not proud, but just happy that I managed to reach that by myself with the help of the fans. And all of a sudden, I'd been doing this for like 3 or 4 months, and COVID hit. And then all of a sudden, I finding myself with a live streaming setup when everyone's locked down online, and it just went boom. Everyone got involved, and it was fantastic. And talking about time, the nature of kind of what I've always done is have lots of side hustles to make money and survive, because being very open with you, being in a metal band, unless you are signed to a major label or you're a huge big artist or a legacy artist, you know it's hard, it's a struggle. And Twitch has become the thing that is kind of like that little extra that's given me time to kind of be flexible and not have to worry about all these distracting side hustles, like, teaching people to sing, because I was a vocal instructor. Well, I'm a vocal instructor, but everything's online now, and I don't teach one-to-one anymore, and that was a very time-consuming thing to do day in and day out. So I wasn't actually singing my own material hardly at all, because I was so busy doing other things, and I've got 2 kids, being the dad at home. Twitch, however, people are letting me sing to them daily and supporting me in that process. So that's also increased my vocal skills, my performance skills, and it's just like this amazing community where I can have a much closer relationship with the fans and followers of the music and be super comfortable at the same time. So freeing up time. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like it's made you a more more socially confident sort of person? And I don't know what you were like obviously before Twitch and after, but do you feel like it's changed how you interact with people, or is it? Yeah, or do you feel like you kind of?
It's a weird thing. I mean, you've obviously experienced it yourself, but when you're streaming, there's nobody in the room. You're kind of talking to yourself in a lot of ways, responding to comments, but you have to kind of initiate that conversation and keep talking. And I'm not normally that kind of person. I'm not an extrovert at all. I'm very introverted. So it has helped me come out of my shell a lot, and it has helped me in social context. But also, as a performer, it's helped me to actually have better confidence on stage. The ability to be comfortable with expressing myself and not being worried about it. Because when you stream, you obviously see yourself. If you watch playbacks, you create clips to post on social media. So you observe how you are from the viewer perspective. And initially I was a bit shocked. I was like, oh, is that really me? Is that what I sound like? Is that what I do? And it made me a bit uncomfortable for a while. But then the more you do it, and the more the community say how much they love what you do and how natural you are, and how stupid you are, people like that, and it has helped me to be more comfortable in my own skin, I think.
Yeah. The something that what you're talking about, how it affects even things like your live performances. Something I picked up on, and I always resonate with these. I've seen sort of several. I was doing a sort of a deep dive of your Instagram, otherwise known as a stalk, as I've been told. I've been rather confronted by previous guests for stalking their Instagram, but it's part of the gig, so Sure. And I was doing the friendly peruse of the. I should stop finding other ways to say that, shouldn't I?
Excuse me.
of you sort of looking through Instagram, and I remember when you posted it saying about how you'd had trouble kind of going back to the live performances, getting back into it from time off. And I always appreciate when artists that people look up to are honest about, like, okay, that was difficult or that was shit, like, because especially when on that run you're playing some like big shows, and I think it's always nice to see a bit of honesty, but in sort of almost like quite, I think the way you, obviously I can't remember quote like word for word what you said, but I think it was the way you were saying about it felt like very much a train of thought, kind of, this is what I'm thinking now, and I always appreciate seeing that from people. But yeah, how was that whole kind of, could you kind of go into more detail on that?
Wow, you're really touching on a lot of subjects here in one question.
I'm giving you what I'm doing is just pick.
I could talk to you forever about this, and it's actually very relevant to something that I'm going through at the minute. But anyway, like after COVID had kind of started to ease a little bit and live shows were happening, all of a sudden TesseracT hadn't performed for 3 years, really. And the first shows back were supporting main support to Bullet for My Valentine, doing arena shows around the UK. So all of a sudden we'd gone from, it's like TesseracT's growth has been so weird. It's like always been a steady gradient of growth. We've never kind of like seen the audience starting to dip or the, ticket sales dipping. Like it's going stronger and stronger, and we get bigger and bigger opportunities now. And considering it had been 3.5 years since, longer, wow, nearly 5 years since the previous album. Yeah, stepping into those shows was frightening because, you hear a lot of people say how they started to become more anxious due to all the lockdowns and socially anxious. And I definitely felt a little bit of that. But not performing, not being in a room with people on stage and having that interaction, it really knocked my confidence quite a lot. And I don't know why. I can only put it down to, like what I said in my message, like I felt very uncomfortable on stage, very anxious, very unsure of myself, like second guessing things and questioning myself constantly. I had a very negative experience on stage where I didn't want to be there. And this is a job it's a dream job that I've always wanted to do. But before COVID, as on the back end of the last campaign, loving life, doing amazing shows. So yeah, and also like the way that I interact with, fans and followers is perhaps a little bit different to a lot of other artists in the fact that I am quite open and I do talk about things that maybe are hidden from a lot of other artists. Because the way that I view, God, this is such an involved question. When you're an artist, there's an element of smoke and mirrors that people love as fans. Seeing the way that people perceive fame differs from person to person, but generally you look at big acts, and it's very rare that you see openness and transparency with a lot of big acts and big names in music. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that I am a big name in music, but I am in that world, and I am playing shows with big names in the metal world. And I see that the way that they interact with people, or the lack of interaction, and to some degree, it goes with the territory. Big names, and people want that bit of magic that you find from that barrier between artist and fan. And I do not have a barrier. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it feels wrong to me to try and pretend to be something that I'm not. If I go on stage and I pretend to be Maynard, mysterious, I am, projecting that I am, this untouchable, magical figure on stage, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't feel right. I've got to be myself, and I am quite an open person. And I feel like it's interesting for people to know the struggles that metal bands have at a certain level, and I've definitely felt those struggles.
Yeah, I think there's a weird balance, and I mean, I couldn't really put myself in the shoes of anyone, particularly the sort of the really hyper successful, the ones you talk about who like comfortably make a living in a metal band. Obviously few and far between, but there is, like you said, you almost want to. Well, it's actually, I remember your manager Adam saying how you want to have that element of not otherworldliness, but like you want to take you want to take the audience somewhere else, but at the same time you don't want to be like you don't want to be dishonest and disingenuous about. I'm not saying that's what he was saying. It's
no,
more
not
he
at
was
all.
making. I think he was talking about a music video or something. He was making a very relevant point, but it's a weird one to balance.
It's
that
a hard
way.
balance to find. Absolutely. I think the thing that stops me from trying to, some artists don't have an online presence. They don't live stream. They don't post on social media. They are just that artist, and they just tour and write music, and it works for them. I've learned that in order to survive at my level, I've always had to have a close relationship with my fans. And I read an interesting book years ago, which described, you might know the book, I can't quite remember the name of it, but I always remember a particular paragraph which said, if you want to be successful as an artist, you can achieve that by having a dedicated following of 1,000 people. That's all you need. 1,000 people that will always support you in buying merchandise, support you in buying your next release. They're invested in everything. That's all you need. And on a much lower level, like on my Twitch, I don't have, 1,000 plus people tuning into my Twitch streams. I have a small group of people that are just constantly there supporting me. So it's just reinforces the fact that, you don't need to be mega successful and have a huge profile to succeed. I know success is relative, but to me, where I am at this moment in time is comfortable. It's a nice place to be, and I really love speaking to people. I love having that relationship with people. Like, we have a Discord, we have lots of other places where we have get-togethers, and I've made so many amazing friends. And I've always been very standoffish because, like, you do sometimes get some very overzealous people that kind of overstep the mark a little bit. I've had people that have, dived into my personal Facebook page and taken photos. I've had fake profiles created where men have been approaching women pretending to be me. I've had people steal photos of my family and use them in inappropriate ways. We have had stalkers. So there's that element of connection with fans that is a bit weird. So that's always been a bit of a barrier for me. But slowly, the more I've gotten to know a lot of friends and fans, there's a positive side to it. So it isn't all negative. Some of it can be frightening, but the majority of it is like classic interaction, really great people.
Yeah, I think the thing that's lost a little bit is that so something I've started doing with the podcast is I wouldn't make any great secret of it, to try and promote it is instead of just like paying, well, there's a couple of things I've started doing, but one thing in particular I've started doing is try and get the podcast kind of out there a bit. Obviously it's social media, it's social, the whole idea is it's meant to be social, and there's nothing social about me messaging someone going, check out my podcast. But there is something social about me going on hashtag metal guitar or something, because I have a lot of like metal guitarists, because I'm a guitarist myself. So I search that, I'll find some videos, watch them, and try and actually listen to what they're doing. And I'll like it, and I'll send them a message saying what I thought was good about it. And there's no lie in there. There's no like, and I will never ask them to follow me. And I've had a few people just go say, "Oh, you made my day, thanks," and they won't follow, but it's like it's fine, and then some of them just follow because they think it's nice. I've said something nice, and it's not like I'm,
it's showing that you're interested in other people rather than just having self-interest and trying to grab people's attention. And that's friendship, isn't it? In a way.
Well,
Just being
it's also
friendly.
what you said friends and fans, which is quite an important distinction. You know, like they can be both. You know, obviously, like you said, there's kind of a line. You know, you got to have like a in the same way, like so with the guitar teaching, I have students that some of which I would kind of consider friends. There's obviously that kind of line where, like, a few of them follow me on Instagram. I don't follow them back or anything. I just kind of leave because my Instagram's public, so you can't stop them, you know. But I do draw that kind of line just from the professional sense, because you can't be being pally with. Like, I every now and again I bump into one of my students just when I'm having a drink with my girlfriend or something, and he'll be out having a drink or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, you're right, and I'll be sort of half trashed, like, I promise I'm a professional. But it is nice, like, that is how you maintain it, I think. And it's like you were saying, I mean, I suppose the difficulty is, if you take any band, you know, you can have however many tens of, or if not hundreds of thousands of followers, you know, on the social media. But God, I sound like old in the social media. But obviously, it's only that small. It's such a tiny proportion of them that actually actively engage. I found that if I share a reel on Instagram and it gets like 10, 15,000 views, I'll get like 3 followers off of that. The conversion rates of all of these things, it sounds very clinical saying it like that, but it is so low. It's crazy how much you have to show stuff to people too. I don't know if it's always been like that with music and everything, but
I think it used to be the reach of posts was a lot bigger. I'd say 3 or 4 years ago. Everything seems to be so squeezed now. Disposable content does far better than, you know, a post about, hey, I've released a record. Like, I see some massive artists, like major artists, that post out on their Facebook pages, and they have, like, you know, millions of followers, but like 100 likes on a post. And it's like, that does not compute. Like, how?
I have an entirely relevant thing. So I chatted to your friend James. I believe you know him in your band. And I remember I assume it must have been him, put the podcast Instagram podcast post that I'd done. He just shared it to the TesseracT story, and I think so. I can't remember how many followers you guys have got. I think it's over 100,000, isn't it, on the band?
Yeah.
I think I got maybe like 2 or 3 followers or something. And it's like, that's crazy. That it went, in theory, it went out to, you know, 100 and something thousand people. But I've had the same, it's been the same with it's not like you guys just have some crappy like reach. It's like everyone I remember there's...
It's the same everywhere.
Really. Yeah, I got there's a YouTuber who I did a podcast with. He's got just shy of 1.5 million on YouTube. He put it in his YouTube community, and I think I got about like 800 views, which is okay. But it's crazy that reach is so...
You got to work so hard at it.
Yeah.
Like, people like things just for the sake of it and then forget about it. It's like you've got to be, you know, so relatable to people in order to retain their attention, I think.
Yeah. How do you Huh?
Sorry.
Corey, I had I had a question that's going to take you in a bit of a different direction.
That's fine. It's all good.
Okay, so what I was going to say was, how do you because obviously the nature of your band is not that it is your 30-second soundbite kind of band, and you wouldn't, you know, when you compare it to some artists around today, even in like the metal scene. So how do you kind of maintain your integrity, if you like, as a band like that, where, you know, you're not going to be... Well, I don't want to kind of name an example because it sounds like I'm going to be sort of trying to out bands for being like poppy, but that's not even a bad thing. I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, so for example, like more recent Architect stuff is much more accessible, right?
Sure.
How do you kind of maintain a sort of sense of honesty in what you're doing with all that pressure?
To think about it. Yeah. Try not to think about it. That's the only way you can survive, is just focus on the things that are important, and that is your enjoyment and the quality of the music you produce. Not trying to force it into a whole... I think because we've always done our own thing, and you can, you know, every TesseracT album is sonically quite different, I would say. There's always that sense of the underpinning TesseracT approach to writing music, but sonically very different. And I think that's what's done us quite quite well, really, is the fact that when you release an album now, or when we release an album, like, people don't know what to expect, and that's quite exciting in a way. Keeps things fresh. But we definitely don't try and produce music to fit in with trends. It's much more about our personal enjoyment, I think.
Yeah, I think it's got to, I think for the sake of longevity, it's got to be that, really, hasn't it? Otherwise, you kind of, yeah, I feel like you've just end up kind of, it's funny because I've had some weirdly, in my head, what we're talking about now, to me, it seems so, what I just said about doing and what you've said about kind of staying true to what you do. It's, to me, that seems such a, what's the word? Like, it has to be that way. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it seems obvious to me that that's how the best way to do stuff. But then I've chatted to other people who are kind of quite on board with the idea of just like hopping on with trends and kind of following them to kind of push themselves. So I think what is one of the more positive things about the way the industry sort of is that you can choose to do that, and I don't think there's any shame in that at all. Like, it's its own thing. I think you're more susceptible to, you'll get spat back out pretty quickly if you don't keep up. That's the difficult thing. But if you're good at keeping up,
it could be good
really
for getting a bit of a push and getting some hype. I know bands have been around for a long time, and all of a sudden, through one element of social media, they might have had a lot of exposure, and all of a sudden there's an influx of attention on them. And then you ride that for as long as you can, because it's not a bad thing. We've never had that, I have to say. I don't think TesseracT have ever had that. We've never had that big push, never been put on a pedestal, never had massive attention. It's always been a slow grower for us. And I think we're definitely the kind of band where we're not necessarily immediately grabbable especially when you come and see us for the first time. Because the music isn't generic. It's not, 4/4 breakdowns, easy to listen to metal. Not that metal's easy to listen to at times, but it's complex. It's complicated in places, and like the rhythm of the music is often quite jagged. The vocals don't follow, the pattern that people are used to. So, but I do think that when you give it a chance, I think it can get under the skin. I have a lot of people that tell me that. They were like, I've been putting off TesseracT for years, and I've discovered you last year, and it's the best thing I've ever heard. What's taken me so long to get here? Which is amazing. I'm like, one of us. Join the team. It's all good.
You're sat there at the sort of top of the stairs, looking all zen, like, you finally realised.
Dad's here.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. So I remember my friend. This would be probably like 5 years ago or so. I remember my friend who's always been more into the really progressive stuff than I have, and he showed me you guys about 5 years ago, and it didn't quite click. I mean, bear in mind, I think he just showed me like a little. I didn't really fully. I think it was in the car or something. Like, I didn't fully kind of take it in, kind of thing. But and funnily enough, actually, since having met you, it's that sometimes it's almost that prompt to be like, oh, I'm going to go and check more of that out. And then all you need sometimes is that it's not even open-mindedness. It's just that like connection to it in some way. So what you're doing with Twitch and that, there's going to be loads of people going, oh, I know that guy. Converted
quite a lot of people that aren't even into metal music into being TesseracT fans. Like, so many new, the way that Twitch works is, viewers dip in and out. We've had a lot of front page features as well. So, sometimes we've had like 6,000 random people watching us because we're on the front page of Twitch, and people are like, oh, what's this? Who's this? This is really good. And then they end up becoming, lifelong fans. It's amazing.
It's really interesting that you say we. You're like, and we do this and we do that. It kind of.
It's a community. We do it together. Absolutely, it isn't me. It's like the community are half as responsible, because it wouldn't exist without them. And it's like the community that I've cultivated, and I've been quite careful about this. Actually, this is an interesting one. So even on my Facebook page that I've had for years, I will ban people like straight away, if they show signs of anything negative, aggression, you know, unnecessary negative opinions, any form of harassment, anything negative, I will very quickly disregard them. And I always try and cultivate a very friendly, nice, supportive atmosphere on all of my socials. And it's the same with Twitch. Like, if you come into a Twitch stream, you're going to get greeted like by loads of people that want to pay an interest in you and want to know what you're about, and, you know, encourage you to come and join Discord and then make friendships, because that's what it's all about. And man, I just love the community, which is why I say we when I talk about Twitch.
Do you think this is this question might prove ever more relevant in about 15 years? This whole move towards VR and all this stuff, you know, and sort of AI integration into our lives, you know. I was watching Mark Zuckerberg talk about what they're trying to do with augmented reality, you know, with the glasses, and he was saying about how, you know, there's going to be kind of what they're going to work towards is this sort of, you know, this idea of, it's a bit like in the sci-fi movies where, you know, you got the glasses and you look and there will be almost, you imagine, you see like checkpoints and stuff in the video games.
Yeah.
But he's saying it, and he's saying things like TVs won't exist because you will just see it like on the wall as almost like a little video game marker and stuff. And I don't know where I stand on all of this stuff, because I'm not like a religious person. I don't worry about interfering with the human, you know, kind of, I know some people worry about that side of things, but like, so I think I'm not as afraid of all these developments as some people. But I do wonder, like, is there any going back once you start? So for example, with Twitch, right, like it's not unrealistic to say that you might be Twitch streaming into someone's glasses in the next 10 years, you know?
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing. And then that complete, you know, think about like when you're on your phone and you're distracted from life, whatever you're doing, that's all you're doing, and you have to just do that. Whereas we could literally be talking, and if you had those glasses on right now, you could be in a whole other place just not listening to me. It's weird to think. I don't really know. I don't have a question here. I just thought.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I've had VR for about 3 years now. When I first used VR, I got a Oculus Rift. The opening kind of game, like demo game, where I can't remember the name of it, was there's a little, in like a camper van, there's a little robot, and you have to get a disc and put it into a CD player, and a little robot pops up and he flies around the room. And I just remember being really overwhelmed, like, oh my, what is this? And I sat on the floor for like an hour, just looking around and touching the floor, like trying to make sense of what was going on around me. And I absolutely fell in love with it, actually. So I started to do, you know, VR streams as well. And I had a really interesting experience in VR chat. So you might have heard of that free online community game. But basically it's a social thing where people just go, you have an avatar, you can visit different rooms, or like go on the beach, and there's like music playing, you can chat to people, VR chat, and make friends. It's got a really bad name for itself because there's a lot of harsh memes on it, and there's some weird things that happen. And I don't think it's very safe as well, because you get kids in there mixing with adults, and like my first thought when I went in there was, this is predator territory. This is prime location, and it's not monitored. Because parents can just log kids in, then the kids are on with the headsets and they're talking and playing, and you hear these conversations between adults and kids, and this swearing and all sorts of profanity, and I'm listening to this stuff, and I'm like, if that was my kid, I would lose my, oh my goodness, that's so wrong. Yeah. And especially because I'm like an ex-police officer, like I can see all the dangers with it. But that aside, there's some really cool things, because I got some of my community to join me in VR chat, and we found a retro wave environment where you're on like a platform, and you've got all these like neon pyramids like floating by, and it's you can't really put it into words until you experience it, how visually fantastic and stimulating it is. But there was a stage within this VR arena, and we were playing videos in the back, and I was a giant banana, and I had two other bananas behind me, and you can reverse the camera and then stream it. So I was streaming myself on Twitch. I was in VR, and I was singing through some of my material with dancing bananas behind me. And it was just the most bizarre, fantastic way of actually getting super close to people, like the closest you can get to people without physically being there. And that's when I first had the epiphany of, this is going to be the future. Like, people will want to do this all the time. People want to shop, people want to buy. The possibilities of it are incredible. For an artist, imagine having a dedicated VR back end of their website where you can have a lounge, games to play, a merchandise area where you can just walk up and look at the merch in VR, click a button, go to your browser, buy it in VR, listen to all your discography, meet fans, do showcases of new songs in VR, in a cinema in VR. Like, all these possibilities were like whirring through my mind. And then about a year later, Facebook announced Meta. Like, we're moving into Meta. I'm like, they're already on it. They've been thinking about this for years. And then there are now bands that are doing VR shows. Like, Bjork did a VR show, which was absolutely fantastic, where you can actually, put your headset on and walk up to Bjork while she's performing. It's like mind-blowing. That's definitely the future. And like, VR live shows will be a thing. Yeah, it's great.
I think what will happen, I think it's inevitable. I think it's the way we're going to go. And it's very much, I think there's two things. One thing I think is, I hate the idea that if you don't do it, you're going to be left behind. Like, if you don't have a phone, or if you don't have a smartphone,
absolutely,
you're left behind. And actually, it affects things like your employment, even on a professional level. If you don't have a smartphone, if you don't have Facebook, how many workplaces have Facebook groups and stuff. But then the next step is going to be, if you're not living your life, like, sort of on, like, in the VR world, I mean, the streets are going to be empty, aren't they? Like, and but then there are other things like, again, it's quite an interesting chat with Mark Zuckerberg, and he was talking about, I don't know if he's an alien or not, and I still don't fully know what to think about him. I don't know if I like him or not. Yeah, I can't judge him fully. He's very hard to read. I can't tell if he's genuinely passionate about it or if he is absolutely crazy. I don't know. But somewhere in between is probably.
If they're talking about it, it will happen.
Yeah, and what's the other thing I was going to say? But he was saying things that I thought were interesting. Like, you could live in the UK, for example, and you could have a job in, like, the US, and you could turn up to the virtual office, and because it would be so, like, by that point, hopefully. I'd say hopefully, I don't know if I'm hoping for this, but, it would be so, like, high resolution and realistic that you could be in the office. And the same way you were talking about, how you were driving for hours to rehearse with bands. Like, you can just be, assuming internet speeds catch up with it by then, which I'm sure they will, you could just be, like, VR rehearsing with the band. You could not even live. Can you imagine there'll be bands where, like, they're all just dotted around the world, but they just have, like, a gig in a VR room somewhere?
It sounds very similar to the way that I've actually, kind of existed in different bands, because, like, when I joined Sky Harbor, we lived on 3 different continents. My side project, White Moth, is on 3 continents. TesseracT, at one point, we were in various different countries. So it's like, how do you create music? How do you rehearse? It's all file sharing. It's all internet-based creation. That's kind of what's already happening now, but just not with the VR element to it. I'm speaking to you from another part of the country on Zoom. What's to stop people from putting on a headset and going to a virtual workplace? Yeah, all these things will happen.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of, I bet you didn't know you signed up for this.
yeah.
yeah. There's one other particular thing, and this is the quality of notes that I write before I chat to someone. my exact notes for this conversation were beer face, fan of cans, question mark.
Right. Yeah.
Because I was like, he got his face on a beer, and to me that's just like the dream. So like,
Yeah,
talk of
that's
success.
That's success. That's it. I've achieved it. Done.
Are you a beer lover?
Yeah. I think ever since going to the first time I discovered craft ale was actually in America. Go figure. On one of the first Tesseract tours, and I got hooked ever since. There's an amazing. People in America might disagree, but there's an amazing IPA called Two Hearted Ale, which is like one of the best IPAs I've ever tasted. And it's like a traditional India Pale Ale. And I just fell in love with it. And then a few tours after, James, the guitarist, did Beer Blog. If he told you about that, which basically, in exchange for people bringing us local free ales, he would give them guest lists to a show, and then he did a thing where we reviewed all the different drinks that we had. So every night for like a whole US run, we had so many IPAs. It was ridiculous.
That reminds me of I can't remember where this. I was seeing Osiah in Bristol. And do you know them? My friend used to play drums with me.
Okay.
I don't know what he does now, but anyway, I was watching them and I was chatting to him. And apparently, there's a guy who, this guy still exists. I'd love to hear who he is. Who he's like a chiropractor or like an osteopath or something, and he loves metal bands. I really hope this is true as well. I feel like he wouldn't have made this up. And he's like, he will just offer his services for free, like guest list to shows, which is awesome, because how many bands wouldn't love like a quick crack and a massage?
We have friends that do that as well. I've got 2 different masseurs that come out and give us a neck and a back massage whenever we're in town. It's amazing.
I think that's I'm like, because obviously like what I'm doing with podcasting, that's like press, it's more like official, and if you go to a show, feels more like business. But if I just was like a masseuse or masseur or whatever, what is it? I thought it was masseuse.
Masseuse, yeah, probably.
I think it's masseuse. But masseuse sounds sillier.
One's supposed to be female, male. Can't remember the difference.
Oh, I don't know. I never got into the technicality. Yeah, but I feel like it's an interesting way of.
I might be making that up.
Well, so there was there's a couple more little things I wanted to ask you about. I say little things. I mean, I don't know how it depends how you kind of it depends how in depth your answer, I guess. But you mentioned Maynard earlier.
Yeah.
And something I feel is different. I feel like is he someone you look up to particularly as a singer?
I'm a big fan of the stuff that has been involved in. A Perfect Circle are one of my favourite bands. Like when I was 16, I stumbled across their live show in Nottingham at Rock City when they toured Mer de Nom, which was their first album. And I remember it was the first real rock gig that I actually went to, and I was front row, and it completely changed my outlook on live music. I would say that was the show that made me go, wow, I want to do that. Absolutely. So I do look up to him as a singer and a frontman. Absolutely.
Yeah, because here's my sort of compliment to you is I feel like sometimes with his sometimes when I listen to his stylings and his way of presenting his lyrics rhythmically, sometimes I feel like it really sits almost because when you'll be familiar with this kind of, I'm sure with this kind of challenges, they've got this quite, like you said, jagged rhythms, a bit like you've got. And there's a balance to be found between sounding like you're following all of that, but then not just being like, the song's in 5, so I'm going to sing 5 things, And I feel like I really like how you will sometimes sing kind of over these things, almost sounding like you're disregarding them, but in a good way. How do you kind of, if one of the guys just shows you a rhythm and you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know, what's the thought process there?
It's changed a lot. When the guys first got in touch and they sent over Concealing Fate and they said, could you write some stuff to it? I remember being super excited, for one, because I was actually a big fan of the band, and they didn't even know that I even knew who they were. I already liked them. So it was a big opportunity for me. I sent them a short clip on Origin, which is Concealing Fate Part 6, of like 30 seconds of me doing something. And I remember it being very, very difficult in some ways to write to, but it felt natural. It felt right in my head. And it was a very floaty part that kind of locked into certain elements of the kick and snare in places. And I had to really learn it. And they ended up getting back saying, that's incredible. Can you come and rehearse with us? We'd love for you to be a part of it, blah, blah, blah. Look, cut a long story short, I joined TesseracT that way. But it's gotten easier over the years. And I used to struggle to write vocal melodies a lot when I first started, because I had no musical education at all. It was all vibe. Literally that whatever came to my head, I would try it. Did it work? Did it fit? If it felt good, it would stay, generally speaking. I wasn't always that good at it. Sometimes it was very hard, but like over the course of the last 10 years, I've worked on loads of different projects, different genres and styles, mostly progressive music and alternative. And I think I'm on like album 17 at the minute. So like now when I listen to music, I just hear things instantly. I'm like, there's the melody, and it's such a weird thing. I don't have to sit in front of a keyboard and write it. I don't have to figure it out on a guitar. I just hear it in my head. And the way I write music is I'll go for a drive in the car, nice scenic view. I vibe to the music, and if the music makes me feel emotive, if it gets me pumped, if it makes me feel emotionally vulnerable, then I know that it's an amazing piece of music, and I often just respond to that naturally, and the first thing that comes out generally sticks. It's a weird thing. I've definitely gotten better about it.
Yeah. What do you think is like your most emotionally vulnerable kind of song?
Ooh, there's a lot. There's a lot. There really is. Like I don't tend to write music unless it's about something that I've either experienced or that I feel strongly about. April from TesseracT 1 is actually really dark. That's a song that covers serious domestic violence. Things that I encountered in the police force, because I was a high-risk domestic specialist when I was in there, and I had some pretty horrific stories. So that kind of made its way onto the album. Like Tourniquet is just and Polaris is just a really heartfelt, open song about being vulnerable and needing somebody's love to kind of like smother the pain. So that's hence Tourniquet, using someone's love as a bandage. That's quite a tough one. Without wanting to go into like personal details, which I don't want to do. There are some quite deep songs on every album I've ever written. Like every song has meaning to me, and when I sing them, I do get emotional. It's hard. You have to kind of like hold it back because it can really get in the way you're singing. So you have to kind of like, okay, stop, carry on, perform. You're thinking too much. You're thinking about it too much, but that's a good thing, because when you are thinking and feeling what you sing, then you have real emotion, and I think that's probably one of the attributes to the way that I write and perform that is probably one of my strongest assets, is that I'm not afraid to inject myself into the music. I'm not just a copy-paste, singer that will just sing lyrics without knowing what they mean. I have to mean every word, and I put myself into it. So every song has to be kind of deep.
No, I'm always kind of... Because I sort of wrote most of the lyrics for my old band, and we kind of you've met. I'm no longer in said band, and sort of decided to leave. But it's a weird thing because I'm not. It's not that I'm not an open person, but I'm not a very loud person. So to then put sort of some of the lyrics, I think to me, I like to write quite ambiguously, so that a lot of metaphors. I know some people like much more direct stuff. And I remember we were sat in the studio, sort of not so long before I left with the last song that we kind of didn't really finish. And the guys and the producer was asking about the lyrics and what they mean. And I was saying what they kind of, and then what they're about, and all the guys are looking at me like, "Oh, are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like, you know, but yeah, it's weird how it can really be a window into the soul, and that's why I'm always interested to ask about it, because I think there's an extra level to it. I think it's not me trying to be pretentious, you know.
No, not at all.
But I think that the lyric and the melody together has something quite special. I think it's why, even though I'm a guitarist, I've never been as drawn to instrumental music.
Right.
I still love it. There's loads that I do love, but whether it will kind of go to the grave with me kind of thing, I don't know. Whereas there's certain lyrics that, with the right melody and the right
really
kind of
resonate,
delivery.
can't it? But it's storytelling. That's the beauty of it. And I like you, in the past, I have been quite ambiguous with my lyrics, because I do appreciate that people take their own meanings from songs a lot of the time. And I remember listening to a lot of rock and metal bands in my early teens and 20s. Half the time I had no idea what people were singing about, but I latched onto certain words and phrases and thought, I can relate to that in my own way. So that's how I understood music. So I just kind of assumed that everybody else did. So I used to be quite literal with the way that I wrote lyrics. It wasn't very poetic. As I've gotten older, I think we tend to wax philosophical a lot in TesseracT. So there's a lot of, like, Sonder was a good example of that. Definitely got more poetic.
Yeah, I there was a lyric. I'm a Alter Bridge are like my heroes, and there are some I love Miles's lyrics. There's some I resonate with more than others, but there was one lyric that I was kind of disappointed because I'd misheard it, and I'd misheard what, in my opinion, was a better lyric. Because the lyric is, "Oh, how we ache to be free." So obviously we want to be free, which is pretty plain. Like, not plain as in boring, but just you know what it means, right? But I thought it was, "Oh, how we hate to be free," which I think has a lot more depth to it. Whether it would have made any sense in the song, I don't know.
It's so funny when you kind of misinterpret lyrics. Like, my goodness, like, people take my lyrics and come up with the most horrendous things. Have you had it where, when you get lyrics online, I don't know who transcribes them or where they get them from, but some of the interpretations are bonkers. And there's some of, like, the top hits, like, you can search for, like, TesseracT this and whatever song, and, like, I'm looking at the lyrics, I'm like, I definitely did not write that. That is not the lyric to the song. It's ridiculous.
I think for me, the lyrics that always get me are the ones at the end of Chop Suey. The whole sort of "why have you forsaken me" kind of, it's all the biblical kind of stuff. But I always find you've got to be careful with biblical references, not for any causing offence or whatever, or more just because you can just be very cliched about it. And I think it's like, I've heard a lot of people, I hope I'm not sort of treading on any toes here, but I have heard a lot of people where you hear a sort of biblical reference where you think, I think you've just done that because you want to sound clever. But I think, but I think what the way they do it in that song is really interesting. I heard an interpretation of the whole "why have you forsaken me" line is, obviously from the Bible, the whole sort of Christ asking God, essentially. It's kind of meant to be like the one moment where he almost doesn't believe in, like, life's so horrible, he doesn't even believe in or the power of God and all that being Christ. So it's kind of him anyway, sort of thing. I don't quite know. But so I thought that when you pair that with the whole lyric, I just think that whole ending section is so fantastic. But yeah, what's your favourite lyric you've written? Or your favourite lyric, full stop?
Man, I'm not great with lyrics. I think Judith from, like I say, Maiden Om is another song that kind of has a lot of religious context running throughout it. Like there's a lyric, talk to Jesus Christ as if he knows the reasons why he did it. He did it all for you. It's like this song where it's like, you could take it one of two ways. One way is that he just is disregarding scripture and Christ and all this stuff, and calling it fake or whatever. The other is actually calling out because he believes in it. It's like there's two different sides to it. So I like how kind of clever that is. As a listener, just listening to that objectively, you could take it one or two ways. I can't quite remember. I think it's probably the former belief, but they're cracking lyrics. It's a brilliant song. My own lyrics, man, I've written quite a lot, and half the time I can't even remember what I've written. There's that many lyrics. Possibly, again, Tourniquet or Seven Names. There's some interesting lyrics in Juno, which kind of ties into the concept of Sonder itself, which are quite nice and poetic. But I don't generally kind of like, look back at my own lyrics and go, oh, I did a good job there. I like that one.
No, I do.
So, do you really? I don't.
Yeah, I'm quite.
Perhaps I should.
Yeah, maybe. There's one more I'll give you. The one of my favourite ones, the Rage Against the Machine lyric, where obviously a lot of what they discuss is sort of challenging power in institutions, and it's the lyric, "I'm inferior," is in question. Like, are you calling me inferior? And then he said, "Who's in fear of you?" or "Who's inferior?"
Oh, nice. That's clever.
I was like, that's so clever. Yeah,
that's very cool.
Because it's like, are you calling me inferior? I'm not afraid of you, kind of thing. I just think that's so like that really. Like, whoa, yeah, I agree with you now. Like,
I'm definitely not that poetic at all.
It's almost not poetic. It's so like
it's clever.
Yeah, visceral.
Clever use of words.
Yeah. If only. Yeah. No, that's well, I mean, hopefully I think we've covered. That might be one of the broadest ranges of things I've ever talked to.
Yeah, that was really weird. We talked about a lot of different things there.
Yeah. Well, so
I enjoyed it.
Unless, well, yeah, that is. I think we've gone through all my questions, which is always good. It means something's gone right.
Nice.
So what I need is for you to ask a question for the next guest to start the conversation.
Sure.
And I need you to plug an artist to the world as well.
Okay. My question would be, do I get to know who the artist is?
Nope.
No. Okay, all right.
I like to keep it a bit more anonymous.
Yeah, okay. What was the one moment in your life? Is this an artist? Is this a musician?
It will be someone in the industry. Let me have a look, because this is the annoying thing. My calendar changes around a bit. Yes, it should be an artist, assuming my calendar doesn't change.
Maybe you could tweak it slightly if it's not an artist. But when was the first moment, and what was it that made you realise that music was going to be a big part of your life?
Nice. That's a good one. Yeah. Well, we've turned the tables a bit here, because your question was like nice and profound, and the one you've given and the one that you were given was also, I thought, quite profound. The two before that had a lot to do with toes. So
it's normally pineapple or not on pizza. What's your favourite colour?
I feel like I've not had the. It's very Monty Python of you. I feel like the pineapple one.
What's your favourite colour? Sorry, I've just realised.
Yeah, I was wondering. I said it. I was like, because you said you like slapstick, and there a little bit.
Red, no blue. Whatever it was.
I absolutely. I watched that back the other day, and I was like, I didn't realise quite how. It's brilliant, isn't it?
It tickled me.
But if you watch the first, I realised I was watching it, and it took about 40 minutes before it got to a scene that I actually couldn't kind of remember.
Oh, really?
Because I just thought this is so iconic all the way through.
Yeah.
That's why I love Life of Brian, but I think Holy Grail there's something about the way every scene is like its own little movie. It's just they're so funny, those each little. I always, it's like the one with the really eloquent peasants, and then they're all sort of talking about systems of power, and he goes, "Bloody peasant." Cool. And I need you to promote anyway. Stop that nonsense.
Getting sidetracked.
Yeah. Oh no, it's the one that always gets me is when they do the whole Camelot dance, and then he looks back
I
and
can't
goes,
remember that. What's that?
"Oh, when they go to visit Camelot, they go, Camelot," and then it does a cut to like a whole 3-minute musical song and dance in the castle, and then King Arthur just goes, "No, it is a silly place," and then they just leave. And I always find myself saying that in that tone of voice, and I don't think anyone ever gets the reference.
No.
It's just because it's such a like.
There's been probably 2 or 3 occasions in my life where I've said a phrase or a quote from Monty Python. Someone's gone and then kind of like, gone back on me with it. I was like, "Oh, you get it."
I used to work on a farm, and we used to do these like little animal handling sessions for the little kids that would come to the farm. And I picked up like this little pygmy goat. It was really cute, and one of the bosses was like, "That one's a bit young. You need to maybe get one of the older ones." I was like, "I think we're going to need a bigger goat." And she was like, "Yeah, we need a bigger goat." I was like, "What? How do you not?" It's so obvious.
No.
Anyway. So if you could promote a small artist that you or music person, it can be anyone in the industry.
So when it comes to new music,
you had. I remember you had a few.
Yeah, I'm not really that in it. I'm not in the pocket with new music at the minute because I'm writing my own stuff, so I'm not really listening to a lot. But there are some artists that I do listen to, which are quite unheard of and relatively unknown. I've been listening to a lot of chill wave, which is nostalgic synth and lo-fi beats and very synth-driven electronic music, and it is some of the most amazing stuff. Very different to rock and metal, but there's an artist called Hello Meteor, which you might want to check out. It's the kind of music that you could put on in the background while you're working and like totally at zen. There's a song called Virgo, which is great. I've been listening to Greg Puciato's solo record. So
you're gonna have to spell that for me there.
I'll spell the surname. It's Puciato. So Greg from the Dillinger Escape Plan and also the Black Queen. His solo stuff's just come out and it's incredible. Definitely check that out. Relatively low key at the minute. And then also, finally, I know you said 1, but I just came up with 3. Actually, one of my friends who, and I'm not just plugging somebody who is in the world that I live in, but he is one of the artists that have kind of like started out with TesseracT but disappeared for years. Been very busy, and it's Chimp Spanner. So if anyone doesn't know Chimp Spanner, you've got to go check out Paul Ortiz, who that's his name, but he goes under the name of Chimp Spanner. He started to release new music, and it's fantastic. And I just did a song with him called Fractured, and it's the first time he's ever had a vocalist on his songs in like 15 years. He's an instrumental artist. You might like it, Chimp Spanner.
I always hear that name mentioned when like Periphery, yourself.
Yeah, Monuments, TesseracT, Periphery, Chimp Spanner. He was also one of the Gent forerunners at the time, but he got quite busy, and he'd released a couple of albums and an EP, and then he kind of got very busy with a different career path, but he's come back to it now, and it's fantastic.
Just think, if we did VR, the Gent Forum could have been like, you could have literally been in a room together.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Imagine that, yeah. Awesome. Well, if you have any last things you want to promote to the world before we finish up?
A lot of people don't know, but I signed to Kscope 2.5 years ago as a solo artist now, because TesseracT on Kscope, and I've released a couple of albums that you guys might want to check out. But apart from that, new TesseracT next year.
Exciting. Well, thank you very much.